I read the question, because on a different forum, and I read the question, and the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, what a dumb question. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and I said, actually, you know what? It's actually a very intelligent question. This person was asking from a place of ignorance, and not ignorance, deliberate ignorance that they didn't know. And they really wanted to know what the situation was. And I thought, this is actually a good question. A lot of us may act like we know, but we do not. Do you vote for the deputy president? And I thought, obviously, because but it's not obvious. This person essentially is the choice of the presidential candidate. That person is their running mate. So if you're voting for a Dennis and Kevin presidency, you are voting the already pre-packaged choice for deputy president that the presidential candidate has made. So if that's the case, does it matter what you think about who the deputy president should be?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does in so many ways, because the deputy president is not just an ordinary person. And first of all, let's start from the infrastructure of the constitution that then defines the presidency as is. And you find that in that infrastructure, the deputy president is now not serving at the pleasure of the president de facto. But of course, we know that they serve at the pleasure of the president. But in law, that's why today Rigathi is in court trying to canvass his impeachment. The deputy president now must be elected together with the president on a ticket. So it means it does not give a chance for monkey business. Because initially, the deputy president position was used to balance what I call the concept of the saints and the sinners in power. And that is that the president must always stand out as the saint. And the people around him must always be the sinners. And the deputy president, vice president then, will then be one of the biggest scapegoats. That in case anything huge happens that is going to hit the president, that's beyond the ministers, it's the deputy president, the vice president then, that will take the heat. Today, the incumbent president is being held on account for so many issues which he took the heat for on behalf of President Uhuru. Remember when the question of debts, Raila was raising the question of debts when he was still up. And President Ruto, then deputy president, went to one of the media houses and told one of the interviewers there that if you want to ask about the question of debt, look at me in the face and ask me. I'm the one who understands the question of debt. So basically is the final buffer zone to the presidency. So it implies you must, as a voter, you must think carefully of who then becomes the deputy president as well, because this somebody is literally the heartbeat away from the presidency.
Right.
And just to expound that further, in the instance that Martha Karua and Raila Odinga made it to presidency, today Martha Karua would be the president. So then that calls for it to reflect that anything could happen to the president. The president is a normal human being who goes to the loo like everybody else and eats like everybody else. The only difference that he has a higher responsibility in terms of decision making. So as you go to think about a deputy president, then you must also understand that this is a potential president within that term.
Okay.
Not only because they are waiting for the president to pass, of course it's not the wish, but it's because they can also impeach the president, especially if that deputy president has a lot of power, and we'll come to that in the factors that will make a presidential candidate choose a proper deputy president.
But we still see this to basically shorten Odhiambo.
Right.